Hi, this video is going to step you through some of the skills that you're going to need over the course of the semester. You're not going to be perfect at all of these straight off the bat, but by the end of the semester you should have good basics in all the skills that we're going to talk about in this video, because it's basically how we study history. So the first skill that we're going to talk about is actually how we ask our question. So as historians, we ask questions of the past. What do we want to know about it? Certain aspects and things like that. So here you can see for this video I'm doing a sample question of where did humans come from? In order to answer the question, we search for the answers. There are several ways that we can do this. The most common way today is through the internet, obviously, because you do have the whole world in your pocket when you're in your phone. Now you can see here that I've got different search results. One search engine I used was Google, another search engine I used was DuckDuckGo. When we're searching for information, it's important to use different search engines because different search engines will give us different results. There's a whole way of searching, that's a different video. It's under support for learning, and we'll be doing a lot of this in class about how to refine searches and how to actually get what you want. However, when we're searching for evidence, it's not just the internet that we can get evidence from in history. We can actually get it from books, we can actually get it from digging up artifacts. So archaeologists, the pyramids, for example, are evidence from history. So there's a whole range of evidence that we have. Again, that's going to be a different lesson, but we do have to do some searching, and the most common way you will search is probably through the internet. Once we've found our sources, we actually have to read them or examine them. So, for example, if we've got an artifact from history, we'll be examining that versus reading it. But on the whole, we'll be doing a lot of reading. There are different ways of reading documents, so we're going to be checking for a whole range of things. But yep, we're just going to have to get used to reading. Now, the thing about history, and if you remember, I talked about how there are different stories in history. So different people will tell different stories, and so different stories will have different attributes as to whether or not they're actually reliable sources or useful. So for example, a 3-year-old telling a story about how they went to the park on the weekend may be less reliable than the parent telling the same story, simply because a 3-year-old will interpret the world in a very different way. I'm not saying the 3-year-old is lying, I'm just saying that they may not have noticed the same things as the adult, and the adult may have noticed more detail. So basically there are 4 questions that we ask. Is it credible? I.e., is it believable? Do we actually believe this? Is it representative? So for example, in history, there's an expression that's often written by the victors. So when we're looking at answering a history question, it's really important to ask, well, have we got all sides of the history problem? Did we get the victors, but did we also get the losers, right? Because the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. That's the thing about history. Remember, it's not black and white, it's grey, so we've got to find that truth. Is it authentic? So that actually means, has it been manufactured? So sometimes people will make things up. So they'll pretend that a document's very old or that an artifact is very old when in fact it's been manufactured recently. So fraudulent, it's not true. And is it meaningful? So does the source actually address your question in a meaningful way? Is it relevant? And that's a question that you have to answer, because sometimes something might be really cool, a source that you have might be really cool, but it's actually not meaningful in answering your question. When we're reading our documents, we'll actually summarise, and we can do that by taking down dot points. So you can see here that I've actually created a list of dot points. All of these are actually present in the material that I had on the previous slide. You'll see here that the first dot point I've got is genome. Well, I've got to look that up because I didn't know what it was, all that sort of thing, so that means an extra bit of research. Not terribly meaningful to answer my question, right? It doesn't matter whether a genome is relevant. It doesn't answer my question of, where do people come from? So that means that I can just ignore that, but it means it's something that I want to look at in the future. So I've kind of taken it down as a point. The other thing here I've got is the origin of humans is debated, and I've got that, one person said it's 200,000 years ago, one said it's 2 million years ago, but I did note that there are bones as evidence, right? So we do actually have evidence that's kind of independent of other people's thoughts. Now we have to analyse what we've got. So what I've done is summarising is very different from analysis. They're 2 very different skills. Here what I've done is cross-compared the 2 sources that I've got and drawn some conclusions based on the evidence that I have. So both our articles agreed on Africa, so Africa is a no-brainer. But then, they've got this difference of time period again. So then that contributes to the fact that, it is debated where humans do come from. But then I got here, well, but they're of these bones, so can't we date them and things like that. So that last point means it's something I'd probably go and do some more research on to try and answer that question as well, because that would make my understanding of where humans come from a bit more credible, because I'd have more evidence to support the position that I'm taking. The next thing we do is create a hypothesis. So we hypothesize, right? What that actually means is we draw a conclusion to answer our question. Again, in history, there is no right or wrong answer. What there is an answer that you've concluded based on the evidence that you have, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you can write down any answer you like to any question and get an A. What it means is you've got to show me the evidence that you've drawn together, how you've summarised it, how you've analysed it, and how you came to your conclusion. So that's a really important thing that you have to do. So here you can see I've drawn a conclusion to answer my question. Okay, so now we have to justify our answer, right? Now you can see here I've done what's called citations. We're going to do a lot of work on this in class, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot here, but this gives you an example of what it looks like. So here you can see that I'm actually making statements, but that I am showing that that statement is supported by somebody else. Okay, so in history, when we're researching history and answering our own questions, there's always evidence from somebody else. We draw conclusions based on that evidence from somebody else, but we always use somebody else's evidence, okay? It's really, really, really important. And you can see here that I have done it singularly, and then also both of them agreed. I've got both citations there together, so I got both my sources. And lastly, of course, we have to reference. So at the end of all your work will be a reference list. You may have done these in the past. Again, we'll be working on these heavily in class, so don't worry too much. But you can see here I've done a bibliography. I actually call it a reference list. So they're not the same thing, and I'll explain that in class. But it is a reference list, and we have to list all our sources that we've used as our evidence. So this is all the skills of a historian, and they're what you're going to develop over the course of this semester. If you've got any questions from this video, make sure you write them down so we can address them the next time we're in class. Don't stress too much if you don't get a grasp on all of them. This is just very introductory phases, but it's important to understand that this is kind of where we're going for the semester.